Julie, it's you. It's
Good.
message.
Thank you to everyone who joined us as we click over and go live. We've been backstage chatting a bit. So thanks to everyone for joining us for this Ask the Pro series. I'm going to hand it over to the pros, but I wanted to plug very quickly that this series is powered by the Coffee Technicians program. If you're interested in developing your skills as a coffee technician, then the S has a program for you. It's a new program. It's an educational program for new and experienced technicians alike. It's available at the foundation, intermediate, and professional levels. And it consists of 6 modules: coffee machines, hydraulics, electrical, water and preventative maintenance, operations management, and coffee preparation. And so if you haven't checked it out yet, check out our website. It's sca.coffee/coffee tech. And hope to see y'all in some CTEC-P classes, as we call it. So I'm going to hand it over to all of our pros today. And yeah, welcome to the webinar.
All right. Welcome everyone to Ask the Pro. Today we are talking about Roaster Basics 101. All right, so welcome to Ask the Pro series. This is our 3rd season. We're committed to presenting these episodes throughout the year, so please save Fridays at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time for the Coffee Tech Guild. Quick disclaimer, this presentation is for informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in this webcast are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any aspect of the Specialty Coffee Association or the companies the panelists may represent. All right. So today on our panel, we have Candace Madison of sorry, I'm going to butcher this name of Kentucky Boutique Coffee. Apologies for that. And our panelists are David Myers of Mighty Good Coffee and Arnold Holschik. I'm sorry, I'm struggling today. Arno of Bellwether.
That's all good.
I have not had enough, clearly. And moderating, we have Highland Joseph of Espresso Partners. So, as we always kick things off, let's hear what everyone's drinking this morning. Candace, why don't we start with you?
Oh, we're going to start with my morning shame. So that's fun. I have been getting up at 5 to go to the gym. I don't have the wherewithal to make any type of coffee. So poured myself out a cup of Starbucks cold brew and added some oat milk, and I'm drinking.
Hey, that'll do just fine. It'll get you there.
It's delicious.
Excellent. And Arno, what are you drinking out on the trail today?
I'm in my shed today, but
in your shed. Sorry.
I have just finished a quad oat latte made with some Rwanda Rambagirikawa that we get from Ruth at Artisan Coffee Importers, and it was roasted on one of our Bellwether roasters.
Lovely. And Mr. David.
Well, that's funny because I'm drinking Rwanda Agaseki Women's Cooperative Coffee, also from my friend Ruth Ann, who lives in Ann Arbor, right down the street from my roasting company. So, yes.
'Tis the season, David.
Kurt, what do you have in your cup?
It's actually just a kind of blend of the leftover stuff. Just been like Americano with it, so.
Well, delicious post-roast blend.
Yep.
I get the feeling this question is answered differently with the Barista Guild. Like they'd be
Yeah,
like,
oh yeah.
Like a half an hour, I'm drinking a delicate with the whole, every adjective and every explanation.
That's right. I'll jump in. I'm drinking the very last of some night moves from Passion House, thing that I've been drinking the last couple episodes here, and been on the road, so I haven't had a chance to buy a fresh bag in a while, but enjoying a nice, slightly stale bag of coffee at the very end here, but good and tasty regardless. And Maria, how about you?
So my cousins are visiting from the Midwest and they love cold brew. And I had a bag of Partners coffee that I have no idea what it was. And it was like, cause I knew, and I just ground it up. I did it in a French press overnight and then filtered it through a paper filter, and it was delicious. I was like, whoa, okay. Desperate times make desperate measures, and I made it happen. It was all right.
Yay.
Go figure.
What's the quote about necessity and innovation? I think you're speaking to that now.
Yeah.
And Highland, how about you today?
I'm drinking a combination of three desperate old coffees: David's Campfire Blend, an old Congo, and I dug up some peach that we used to test in grinders. So it's actually not half bad. The beans itself are probably about 5 years old.
Oh,
Yeah. Put your address in
Doing
the
it,
chat,
drinking it
Highland.
black. What?
Put your address in the chat so we can fix this.
No, I'm in a place. But Starbucks, Pete's anniversary blend's out. It's my favorite time of year because it's a really good blend.
Oh, yeah.
very nice.
I'm
Right.
with my people. I love this. I'm with my people. People who just drink coffee because it's there and it's good and make it work. I love
We
it.
could probably just have a whole episode about the coffee that we drink.
That's right.
Yeah, this is what I do.
That'd be a fun one.
Yesterday I had.
What vintage coffee are we drinking today that we found at the back of a cabinet
Hey,
somewhere?
you know that's incredibly funny. About 5 years ago, Tim O'Connor gave me some air-packed Japanese coffee, the elephant coffee, and I opened it up about a week ago and made it because I had no coffee at the new house, and it was terrible. I don't remember what I don't remember, but it smelled when you opened it up. I expected this beautiful bouquet or something. It actually smelled like it did come out of an elephant.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I was
not
like,
creepy.
this is not going to be good. And when I tasted it, I was like, wow, it tastes like that scene in Austin Powers, the second movie, where he drinks the stuff.
Oh no.
If you've ever seen that movie, it actually tasted like that. Now, of course, I'm not going to mention roasters, but okay, let's get started. What we have today is we have three really well-known roasters that are also friends of the guild that are going to go through coffee roaster basics, what a machine technician should do, what they should know, and what they shouldn't be able to do. Candace is going to be walking through our presentation, and Arno and David will be adding in any opinions, disagreement, or anything else. This presentation was prepared by Doug Graff last year. It's the same presentation. It's incredibly thorough. So please feel free and ask your questions as we go. With that, I am going to turn it over to you, Candace, and have fun, you guys.
Thanks. Now, I have a tech issue, which means I'll be speaking to Highland a lot. I can't see the screen. So I have this as slide 4, coffee roaster basics, which
We're on drum style.
starting on. Yeah. Pardon me?
We're on drum style and fluid bed style
Oh,
roasters.
you're on drum style. Okay, great. So yeah, I think that everybody is more than familiar with a drum style roaster. If they're not familiar with it hands-on, they will assume that that is the only style of coffee roaster because that's the one you mostly see. Fluid bed style roasters were more popular in the past and have had a resurgence with Bellwether's new models and others. So these are the most common styles of roasters. There are others, but I don't know if you would see them on a normal modern production floor. What do you think, guys? Like, I've seen an atmospheric burner roaster, like a really old one, but it was like a kind of museum piece in a roastery.
Well,
Do you have any thoughts?
I'll say that I think you're absolutely right that drum style and fluid bed, which some people may know is still a Civets, so after Mike Civets, those roasters are definitely the two most common architectures you see out there. I think if you're running a mega factory, you may be doing like continuous roasting systems on a band and stuff like that, but it's really outside the scope here.
So,
Yeah.
I come from Bellwether, and so I'm so sorry to have to say this, but we are not a fluid bed roaster. I'm sorry that I need to. We're a modified drum like a Loring, a fixed drum.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. It's a very common thought, and it's totally understandable.
So I have a question for the panel.
Fluid beds either. They're both really excellent architectures in their own rights.
Cool.
So I have a question. Candace brings something up, and I've read about this recently, that there's been a huge rise in fluid bed style in the last 5 to 10 years. Why do you think that is?
I think people in coffee really love innovation, and I think it's when things are proven to work in even some small niche way, everybody wants to get their hands on it and see whether this is going to be I think roasters are always looking for the holy grail, because we don't want to admit how exhausting it is to try and get something right, even when you've been doing it for 30 years. I've started on a fluid bed roaster myself. I started on Loring's original A15 roaster. There was no drum, no moving parts really. Really fun roasters to start on, but I had no one to talk to, because only 3 or 4 other people were using them, and nobody really understood the technology, not in the wider sense of coffee professionals. Coffee tech people would know that, but coffee professionals didn't. So I think the rise comes from people wanting to roast in the Scandinavian style. I think it also comes from just general love of innovation and technology in coffee.
Arno, David?
If you don't mind, David, I'll say that while Bellwether's product is not a fluid bed roaster, we built a fluid bed roaster early in our history, and we came to the conclusion that actually the quality can be every bit as good. And they do an exceptional job of creating these very, very clear, sort of like crystalline clear acid profiles and very, very sweet coffees. They don't obviously have the same amount of like roundness as you would get from an open flame drum roaster. But I think that this slide really tells the tale. Like, part of the reason that they didn't see a greater uptake is that traditionally people have found ways that are low cost to make them, so that they're really accessible to people. I think like a product like the Artisan is a good example of that today. And they didn't invest a lot of time in temperature control. The burners are usually just binary on or off. And so you don't get the same amount of control that you would do. And there's a technical limitation that we discovered with fluid bed roasters, which is that the airflow has to be at least enough to keep the beans flowing, right? And so you don't have the ability to tune your airflow up and down as you would in a drum roaster. It's part of the reason we actually moved on from the architecture.
Yeah, I agree with half of that, only because working on the Loring meant that I had a lot of control over airflow. But you're right, I didn't really have any control over the burner at all. And you're right, I did have to make a lot of high airflow changes that I didn't love, because I needed to keep the airflow and the flame within balance to actually stay on and move the beans. I will also only disagree with you on one point of the coffees not being rounded. I roasted Maxwell Colonna Dashwood's 2015 WBC finalist espresso on a Loring convection roaster, and actually got a lot of compliments from the judges by how rounded the espresso was. And I think that there wasn't the education and technique at that point to really make those things accessible, which is why I think fluid beds kind of fell off for a while. I think it's different now. That's just mine.
I know, I can totally agree with you, Candace. I think that the fluid bed roasters are really something that is as yet not fully explored by the roasters of the world.
Okay, let's go to David really fast and then review the slide.
Yeah, what I would just is really interesting on a micro scale. The number of people roasting Nakawas is amazing, and it's been adopted widely as a great tool. But also, people are roasting their micro competition lots on a Nakawa, which is a fluid bed roaster, the same as people roasting on popcorn poppers, right? Which is all the same. So at the large scale. I'm trying to remember this large company that makes these roasters that are giant white boxes for high volume, super fast roasting, and all the way down to this micro market, which has been adopted by, third wave plus cognoscenti coffee roasters as a perfectly great tool to make their competition coffee. So interesting.
So Candace, we're on the fluid bed roaster slide.
Thanks. So we did discuss this, that the Bellwether is not a fluid bed roaster per se, but like a modified fluid bed, much like the new Loring in that respect. But Civitz is, first of all, if you haven't heard of Michael Civitz, you should. Second of all, if you haven't read some of Michael Civitz, I think you should, just because he's so fundamental in roasting history and is referenced so often for that alone. So if you want to imagine, if you can, try to imagine an empty chamber. In a drum roaster, obviously you have a drum, it has paddles. In a true fluid bed roaster, there is nothing but a chamber. And this chamber should be wide enough, deep enough, and have rounded sides on one side in order for it to be able to take in a lot of forced air. So if water is a fluid and fish swim through it, we think of air as a fluid in the same way, and beans swimming through them. Once you drop the beans in the hopper, excuse me, the forced air will arrange the beans in a bolus, and they will move in an ellipse in that chamber using only the power of the air and obviously the heat. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the heat transfer is in its largest percentage by convection. We cannot discount the fact that beans will touch the sides occasionally. They don't mostly, but a few beans will touch the sides, and beans will of course touch each other, so that's conduction. But your primary heat transfer will be via convection. And we did discuss that there's very little modulation that you can do to the burner. It's less common than, as I said, the drum roasters. And you're looking at using the end temperature as the finishing point of the roast. I liked it because when I was using it with my second machine, it had few moving parts, so I couldn't really mess anything up. And there wasn't really much for me to take apart, and cleaning was very easy for me. So that's why I really loved working on a fluid bed roaster. And people do and people don't. I think it's literally the style that you were either taught in or that you come and grow to love. Anything to add, chaps? Okay.
I'll just say it was Neotech. I just couldn't remember the name while we were.
Neotech. I've
Neotech.
seen this
Neotech.
stuff, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I want to give just one shout out to Civets roasters for this, because I don't know if anybody else here has this experience, but David, like you said, I started roasting on a Civets in like the mid 90s, and it was somebody's homebrew Civets that they had built in the 70s from a design from the Whole Earth catalog.
Oh, wow.
And Civets roasters are easy enough to make that kind of any mechanically inclined person can make it in their garage if they wanted to. And that's really cool, actually.
I actually still have my popcorn popper Civets roaster from 1997. I keep it.
That's
I'm afraid it's going to
amazing.
explode. I'm afraid it's going to explode if I turn it on. And I keep it as a novelty. We're on Civets half bag roaster slide, and we're going, and then Bellwethers.
Yeah, so we just look at these. I don't know if you want to say anything. I've never worked on a Civets half bag roaster, so I can't really speak to the slide. But as you can see, there's no drum, there's no rounded component that you would usually see in a coffee roaster. There is a chamber.
Oh.
That's how I describe it. How would you describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people might be familiar with the Civets roaster that's sort of like a cylinder, but they come in this.
Yes.
This is the other design where they sort of are a trapezoid, and it's a little bit like kneading dough, if that makes sense. You sort of like pull it open over, and that's how it get blended.
Yeah. And then if we move on to the Bellwether, sorry, Anna, I'm going to throw this over to you as well.
No, that's okay.
Through the mechanism and stuff. Thanks.
I mean, I want to be very, very careful. Like, I'm absolutely not here to do any product endorsement. So I'll briefly discuss the architecture of the roaster and not anything nice about it or anything like that. So the Bellwether, from a roasting point of view, it's a lot like a Loring. It has a fixed stainless steel drum with agitators inside. It's not that everything is quite the same there. We do some things differently here. The thing to know about the Bellwether is that it is a recirculating roaster, so it does not have an exhaust, and it cleans its air as it goes, which allows it to operate in spaces where other ones might not. From a roaster's point of view, it's much like a Loring. From a service technician's point of view, I mean, we have other people on the call actually work on them live, but it doesn't collect a lot of creosote on its internal passageways, which is very different from other roasters, but that doesn't mean that it's maintenance free. It's a quite complex device, and does need regular servicing, sort of on the same time intervals as one might see with your espresso machine.
And is it something that I've only ever seen one? There's a couple in Oakland, and I've only ever seen one. Is it something, the technical aspects that you're talking about, those mechanical kind of adjustments, they can be made by people who own them rather than techs, or?
No, but we did very explicitly try to, I mean, our whole service program is set up to harness existing coffee technicians, so espresso machine technicians. And we'll normally take a very skilled espresso machine technician and show them the device through our training program, and then they're set up.
Right, okay.
It is electric. That's the other big differentiator, no natural gas. And so from a technician's point of view, you're looking at solid state relays, thermocouples, motors. Our motors are running on variable frequency drives, which is less familiar to espresso machine people, more so to roaster people. But it is in many ways a thing that makes things hot and moves things around, which is familiar to espresso machine technicians. And so, yeah, we because there aren't tons of people who specialize in roaster repair, we did want to make sure that we could make it repairable by people who can repair, like, a Slayer or a Strata.
Sure. That's that is helpful. So for a person who always has to call a tech out, that, because I'm not mechanically minded, that's very helpful.
Yeah, I would just say one thing that's kind of interesting about being a espresso tech or a coffee machine brewing tech and a roaster tech is, in my experience, it's rare for us to have to call a tech for our roasting machine. Most of the service we do, all the daily, weekly, monthly service we do ourselves, and most of the repairs we do ourselves now, also often with live video coaching if we need it.
Awesome.
So we're constantly training our people on how to take care of the roasting equipment inside our facility, which I think is and I think, Arno, I brought this up just because I'm wondering on the Bellwether, is that something that can be done mostly the service by a trained person in your environment, or is a technician required often?
We do like to have a technician there because we want to make sure that that the individual has been trained. I think that I would make no bones about it that if you're comparing our roaster to any open flame drum roaster you could buy, including a brand new Probat, our roaster is far more complicated, right? The temperature application is digitally controlled. The entire recirculation system itself, it has a water collection system because it doesn't have an exhaust to the outside, right? So there's enough in there, and it carries 11 kilowatts of power on board, right? So, I mean, natural gas is nothing to laugh at either, right? Like, air bomb in your roastery is not on anybody's agenda. But for the same reasons that we would not really want a barista to crack open a 3 group, right? Just because of the power on board and the concern for human safety, we really do prefer to have technicians repair it. The good news is, well, the first piece of good news, we have a nice warranty, but I need to get out of talking too much about what's nice about the Bellwether. That's really not what I'm here to do.
We do need to move on to drum style roaster.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hyland.
Thank you.
That's why I'm moderator.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So moving along, thank you, David, for that input. It was valuable, actually. We're going to look at drum style roasters. That's mostly because, I mean, the introduction to fluid bed is great, but drum style roasters is mostly what people are working on these days. And I would like to see more of a plurality, but I also know I do run and hug a drum roaster every so often because they're just very easy, and I started on them. So yes, as I said before, they are by far the largest percentage of roasters that you'll see as a coffee tech and as a coffee person. And a lay person is going to recognize that as a coffee roaster if they will recognize one at all. So looking at the brands that we have here, the common brands, Probat, Loring, Dedrick, Mill City, San Franciscan, Gießen, as well as many others, I can say hand on heart that I've worked on all of them. Mostly because, thank you, SCA, for Roasters Guild Retreat and all the kind of tech and fabulous people they have down there with all the machines that you can go and play on and fiddle around with. It's also great to know these popular roasters, because if you're working on them, you'll be working on all. If you work on one, you work on all. This is very quick, but obviously you put the green coffee in the hopper. You charge the drum when it's hot enough with the burners and the hot air the burners heat. The hot air is pulled through the drum. the coffee goes from green to yellow to cinnamon to brown. And if you're really lucky, you pull it out at the right point, having made the correct burner adjustments, and it tastes pretty good. It's not rocket science at all. It does have a mixture of conduction and convective heat. And I think a lot of people mistake, because of the style of roaster, the drum roaster, they assume that conduction is the greatest percentage of heat being used in a drum roaster. It's actually not. It's not at all. Convection is the greatest percentage of heat transfer. But it is definitely a mix of the both. I'm working on a Probat. There were rows of flames underneath my drum. Working on a Loring. There is a burner in the Cyclone. Working on the Dedrick. They are infrared burners underneath the drum. Basically, there are a million different ways you could possibly heat a drum. You'll see a variety of burner styles and placements, but what they're all trying to do is effectively use the oxygen in the air to heat the air, and then the drum, and then the coffee. I don't know why I'm still talking about this. There are different types of controls in terms of the panels and the way they look, but you should be able to control airflow, you should be able to control burner. You can occasionally have timers. So the small Pro Patino that I've used has a little timer on it. Others do as well. They have a ton of moving parts. Some even have chains, like the Dedrick at the back. It's imperative that you have a maintenance schedule, and not just one. You should have multiple maintenance schedules for different timelines, for different pieces of your roaster, depending on how often they get dirty, how often green coffee dust touches them, how often that they move and therefore need to be re-greased. There are schedules. I'm not actually sure if the SCA has a schedule or a set of schedules for maintenance, but I know I've drawn more than a few up. What about you, David?
Well, I'm mostly right now familiar with, Probat has a schedule for all their maintenance. Loring has a schedule for all their maintenance. And, cleaning is by far the major issue with drum style, with all roasters, is daily cleaning to make sure that you don't have a fire, or in our case, we see cooling starting to slow down, and we know that we have, we got to go up our cold stack to get all the chaff out, because this really affects the flavor as well as a safety issue. So daily cleaning is huge. Most roasters have a schedule for greasing the front and rear bearings. They're all slightly different. Pretty common thing to have to do on a drum style roaster is replace the front bearing, because it bears the most of the weight and also is the closest to the heat, so they tend to wear out sooner. On the Loring, that's a Delron sleeve that turns, and on others it's just a direct greased bearing. So those are pretty common. Those are things that most people do themselves. And I will mentioning, Candace, the chain drive on a Dedrick. If you've ever gotten a call in the middle of the night from a night roaster who's had that key slot slip out of the chain and jam the roaster at 400 degrees and almost start a fire, which has happened to me. You get that call.
Wow.
And it's easy to have the drum warp. So checking that chain tension and that alignment on a chain drive roaster is really imperative. And also to remember, on those chain drive or any roaster, don't walk away.
Yes.
Well, the thing is, I've had people cool the roaster off and leave to go get their lunch and pick it up.
Oh, sorry, no, that gave me a physical pain right there.
Yeah, it does. And so, these are all the simple upfront things. And, a lot of older Dedricks, a lot of the parts are actually available at your local HVAC supply store.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of controls are cross-referenced with different manufacturers. And I think that's becoming less less common as roasters have gotten more complicated with all the different kind of controls and electronics. But yeah, these simple daily tasks will save you thousands and thousands of dollars, and down the road. So hugely important.
Yeah, I have horror stories in terms of what we're speaking of now. My Probatino, I took it over from somebody and didn't realize how they had left it. And this is my fault, hand up. I didn't check the bearings. And they hadn't been greased for 5 years. I'm not joking. So there was no grease in there and it was solid. And I didn't check. So within about a month, I noticed it started to make a knocking sound. And then I noticed that the drum wasn't turning during warm-up. And exactly that had happened. The front bearings had stopped moving. The axle jammed the drum against the front faceplate. And I had a warped drum. And to repair that, you might as well have bought a new Probatino. So I think they did. But yes, there are some really easy ways to make your life very easy. And there's some very easy ways to make your life incredibly difficult and financially very difficult. And that's with cleaning. Totally agree.
You guys can move on to main systems.
I would just want to say one more thing. We had a picture of a lowering up on a slide with a pneumatic conveyance system, and having roasted a lot on those, I would just say it's really important to remember to clean out your filters as well.
Yes.
The lowering has several dust traps, and there's a filter on that pneumatic conveyance system which gets dirty really quickly.
Yes.
It picks up a lot of jute from bags and stuff that you dumped in. So that's almost, I find in heavy usage, almost a daily task. Your roaster will thank you for it.
Also wipe out, I run a zero, like an air cycle through the pneumatic, and I also wipe out the hopper because I've had water condensation drip onto my beans and ruin a roast. So be careful with the lowering. It looks shiny and new, but you have to clean it, as with all of them.
Absolutely.
I'm going to move along before Highland smacks my butt onto main roaster systems. So all roasters have 3 main systems working together. I'm going to start with number 2 because I think it's the most important, which is fuel or gas, because if you don't have that, you can't actually turn it on, and the airflow system doesn't matter. So you can either use electric or gas, natural gas or propane. I have had to change massive 6-foot propane tanks by myself, and it's annoying, but it can be done. But if you can get a gas line, that's way better. When it comes to the gas, we'll talk a little bit about safety, but you want to ensure that you know where all the controls are and all the main points are. The other roaster systems are airflow. So you're looking at airflow that goes through the drum, airflow for chaff removal, and also airflow for cooling. Of course, I'm just going to mention maintenance again. All of these things are pushing air, which is pushing dust, which means you need to clean what you can. And then mechanical systems. So as David and Arno were both speaking about before, motors, gears, any motion transfer mechanisms, bearings, fans or impellers, and speed controls. I've never worked on an automated system, but if a roaster has an automated system of any type, that's another aspect that you're going to need to add to your list of the functionality of your roaster. And automation systems tend to be proprietary. And we'll talk about roaster support at some point from manufacturers, but they're not all the same. Some manufacturers will give you a great deal of support, and some will just send you off like little ducklings into the world and you're on your own. So be aware that you know the level of support that you can get all the tech information that you need prior to your manufacturer waving bye-bye in the back mirror. Anything to add?
Not really. I think that's very well covered.
Yeah, I would
Doug
just say that. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
Doug did a great job preparing this when he did his. So I mean, anyway, I want to acknowledge his really hard work on this.
Yeah, I would just add that you're right that my roasters now are getting more and more complex with automated control systems and computers that are built right into the roaster. So, if you've been roasting on something from the, 80s or 90s that doesn't have that, and then you start, working on a roaster that has lots of electronic controls, in our situation, our roaster is quite old, even though it's all been updated, that we're replacing a lot of circuit breakers as we go along. Just from electrical systems that are, starting to wear and tear. So
I have a question. Do you see more repairs as these systems become more complicated with digital? Do you see a higher rate of repair?
Well, I'll take that first. I think you see more complex repairs in some cases, right? Because when my first big large format roaster was a GG and 75, I think. And when you opened up the control panel on it, it was like you were looking at the Apollo 13 mission. There were like 72 physical relays going tick, 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 tick to control logic around making sure there was a purge cycle so that natural gas couldn't build up if the flame had ever been extinguished and that sort of thing. And I think that now you would see one printed circuit board, right? And you can't repair that circuit board. And so you have to get a new one. And if supply chains are challenged as they are right now, that can take down your roaster, right? So I think things have gotten more complicated, but not necessarily more frequent. I don't know. How do you feel about that, David?
I would say that we do more kind of repairing of relays and electronic parts than we did on my first roaster, which was an earlier, Dedrick, very manually controlled. And had a lot less moving and electronic parts to worry about. So I think it's just different, that you have to expand your knowledge base to other systems as well as, what you might have done 15 or 20 years ago.
Yes, I heartily agree. It used to be good enough to kind of know gas fitting. That's not really the case anymore.
No.
Right.
The second slide for main roaster systems says pretty much exactly what we've been saying. So manufacturers do have tech support numbers, but the availability for tech support varies greatly between different manufacturers. I'm not naming any names, but one very well-known manufacturer is absolutely impossible to get on the telephone. And if you do get them on the phone, they don't give you any support. So that has been a challenge for me. And it's not a roasting system I use anymore, and it's one of my favorite, but like that tech support piece was missing. So thank goodness there are people like you all out there to bridge that gap. But another thing to also remember is not all manufacturers will have North American-based tech support. So you're looking at working through different countries, possibly language issues and time zone issues. And whether or not your machine is within warranty or whether it's too old, there's a couple, Provac told me that they wouldn't work on one of my machines because it was, or couldn't give me advice for one of my machines because it was so old. They could give me general advice, but they couldn't come out and repair it and do things that just didn't work on that machine anymore. And I was like, I was about to get really upset. And I was like, no, that happens with every manufacturer. That's, fair enough. And it sucks. And we jerry-rigged it and everything was fine. This is something in the UK. But it was a bit surprising to me to not receive immediate and bounteous tech support. So you're going to want to note the age of the equipment that you're using, the model, whether if you bought it secondhand, as most of the equipment I've ever used, you speak to the original owner if you can and know if there are any tech issues or any other issues that you can kind of either stave off, anticipate, or mention when you make a tech call. I know that David mentioned that he has a lot of documentation on scheduling and cleaning schedules for manufacturers, and I've definitely seen that. But I've only seen 3 or 4 manufacturers and this is only in my experience, that have given me like full specs of a machine and like a full rundown. And I read those. I'm an avid reader of those. I can't understand a word of them because I'm not a mechanic, but I appreciate having them. Have either of you have any trouble getting kind of like machine specs or kind of any of that type of information from your roasting manufacturers?
I mean, yes. I used to roast on a UG22, right? And The good news is that it's not that complex, and I think that it really rewards people who are able and willing to kind of dig in and understand how the thing works. But
Yeah.
there was no documentation, really.
Yeah.
There is a large community of people who have such businesses who are willing to.
Yes.
So that's really nice. But yeah, I think David said it, but it's roasting on an open flame drum roaster is something that's a good idea if you are somebody who likes maintaining your equipment and can do it yourself and enjoys having the power of being able to solve your own problems, I think.
Yes. Or like me, you just call someone. Say I don't want to. No, but you're right.
I mean, I'm pretty lucky in the position that I'm in, that I have a lot of friends who are in the roasting community. So like Doug Graff, who helped
what
with
a
this,
hero.
he's actually above my manufacturer support number in my urgent call list. And as well, the manufacturers that I know them, most of them personally. I'm not just a customer. I work with them on, in support roles. So I don't usually have trouble getting a hold of people, but I know I've gotten calls from people that I consult with that on a Sunday, they call me in because they can't get a hold of the manufacturer at Sunday at 10 o'clock at night. So they'll call me with some, and I'm sure Doug gets these calls all the time too, and often from me on a weekend. But and I'm lucky. Like my current roaster is serial number 3 from 2006, and it's been upgraded several times. But I mean, we're to the point where some of the original parts, are not available anymore. So it's like we start to have to think about, well, what kind of upgrades and and what's next. But I mean, one of the best things you can do is not just build relationships with your manufacturer support people, but other people in the roasting community who have experience maintaining and working with their own roasters, and try to find these relationships where you can, exchange information freely to get the help that you need when you can't get a hold of a manufacturer, because there's somebody out there who's had the same problem, guaranteed.
Totally.
You're absolutely right.
I would say one other thing, which is if you're roasting on an older roaster where parts are harder to get, especially mechanical parts, gears, things like that, make friends with a machine shop, because that part, it may be expensive to get it fabricated, but you can get it fabricated, and then you can save your roaster, which may be worth dozens of thousands of dollars, right, for like a $500 part.
Yeah, that's very true.
We are at the 20-minute mark, the quarter mark, where we start to take questions. So what we have next is an in-depth dive into the air system and the other systems of the roaster, but we've also done a really good job covering roasters. So now I'm going to propose as we open the questions to the panelists and the viewers for the rest of the episode, and continue the discussion, or we can continue to go in depth. You guys make the choice. We've got about 60 minutes left.
This is for everybody else, not for us.
Okay.
So I think they should be able to ask questions. That's just my opinion.
Done a really good job covering the basics, you guys. So what we're going to do is, panelists, cameras on, and attendees, we are going to open the floor to questions or comments. And my comment is something about something that Candace said about finding that sweet spot. One of the things every roaster I know talks about is, how do you find that sweet spot? But how do you train to find that sweet spot? Like, how do you train a roaster to find that perfect blend? Like, David, I'm going to start with you.
The perfect blend of what? I'm sorry.
Coffee, roasted coffee.
Find the perfect blend of roasted coffee.
Oh, the perfect roast.
The perfect roast. Sorry, the perfect roast.
Okay, thank you.
Let's start with David.
Try again. That's a constant. It's constant evolution. I think Rob said it once. I can teach you 1,000 ways to roast coffee, and next day you'll come up with 1,001.
Yeah.
So I think your tastes evolve, your preferences evolve. As you talk to other people, you learn more about what other people are doing, and then it leads to you back to experimenting again. So I think it's constant evolution and tasting, not just your own coffee, but build a network of people that you can share information with.
How about you?
Yeah, I think I would mostly echo what David said. I think in my time running teams of roasters and stuff like that, it's been that you have to view it as a constant iterative process. There's no finish line in finding roast quality and the product that serves you. Like, you want it to taste the right way for you and your customers, right? But actually, that's always a moving target. And if you ever think you've gotten it, then you've kind of lost the game, right? Because you can't get it. You always need to be improving.
Candace?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never, someone accused me of being a coffee expert and I told them to wash their mouth out. I'm just, I'm just trying.
No, it's
I
a
think,
fair comment.
yeah, I think that for me, I call it the handshake. So I teach Q, Arabica course, and I call it the golden handshake. If you can cup and know what you're tasting and find your roast defects within the cup, then you will know how to change your roast in order to affect the profile that you want. But you can only do that by cupping and roasting 97 million times and then doing it again and again. And cupping on your own is useless. Cupping with other people is always necessary so that you can recalibrate and constantly calibrate to what you're trying to put out there.
That's really well said. Here's my next question, and I'm going to start with you, Arno. Is there a future where the Cavitec needs to know how to work on roasters?
I
want to hear from all three of you on that.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good idea for coffee technicians to begin to learn how to work on roasters, because I think in some cases you're like David, and I think, David, you're probably pretty well set up as you've described, right? Although you also have Doug's telephone number on your refrigerator.
We all have Doug's number.
Yeah, we all have Doug's number.
Right. But like in some parts of the country, or if Doug ever retires, like when Steve Pardini retired, I don't know if anybody remembers, that was a big deal on the West Coast, right? And I think it's a good idea to broaden the pool for roasters, because it'll be better for them to have better access to the service, and for technicians because it's a really valuable skill, and it's going to increase your business, right? I think that the missing piece has been that we haven't really known how to safely train espresso machine technicians to work on roasters, and that's the task in front of us now.
I have an ancillary question to that, Arno. David, let's hear your answer, and then we'll go to Candace.
Well, I would say, like, if you're tired of running from one espresso shop to another and trying to fit in 5 or 6 appointments in a day for simple things on somebody's La Marzocco, and you want a job where you're going to spend 2 days of constant work in one place working on somebody's roaster, then Roaster Tech is for you, because it tends to be, bigger jobs, more in depth and longer lasting without moving all your bag of tools back into your truck 10 times a day. And I think there's a real lack of skilled roaster techs. Doug will attest. We've flown him out here to do a 2-day work on our machine, and also train my guys how to do things that they didn't know how to do. Having a tech from a manufacturer show up at your door is extremely expensive, because they have to fly.
Yes.
It's a full day of travel, plus the time that you need to spend in your roaster. So I think I think the market is pretty wide open, really.
Yeah. Absolutely agree with all of that. Yeah, I agree with all of that. Look, the fact that we can name 4 or 5 people on the West Coast and maybe 3 or 4 people on the East Coast to work on roasters and that we all depend on, I'm really happy for them. But my God, it's really stressful to think, like, if I can't get this person on the phone because they're working on somebody else's machine, my business won't run. And so I think from that point of view alone, coffee techs learning to work on roasters will be like basically lionized by the community, just to have more of a pool of people who can help support us in doing the job that we want to do really well. And absolutely what David said, I would much rather sit on a roaster all day and work on that than work on 4 or 5 or 6 espresso machines for like half the money.
Right.
It's a real dearth in our community, and we also need that companionship as roasters. I would love to know more about the tech side, but not have to be dependent on it. So I'd love to have those conversations at Roasters Guild Retreat with people who are working on the mechanics side, because I need to have that type of understanding. And not having as many people like that in the community, I think, is a loss. So yes, I absolutely think tech should work on roasters.
Kurt, wait, I want to ask an ancillary question to that, then we'll go to you. I'm sorry. I'm going to actually start with Arno again here, and then I want to hear from Keegan and Kurt also. So we all know what what a tech, what the Cavitec skill set is, correct? I'm assuming you all know. What else does a tech need, Kurt? What else does a tech need to know to work on roasters? Let's start with Arno.
Well, if you're working on most roasters out there, the first thing you need to understand is natural gas or propane, for sure. Okay, and it's not the same as compressed air. Also, though, many roasters do require compressed air on board. They may have water-based flame suppression systems, right? So there's a couple other things you're gonna have to pick up there. But yeah, just for the safety's sake, if you're working on a gas-fired roaster, I'd say make sure you really understand how to check for gas leaks, that you really understand the purpose of a purge cycle, right? That you, because there is danger there. I'll let other people elaborate. I think I just want to safety first.
David?
I was going to let you go to Kurt.
Okay, Kurt, let's go to Kurt because he got a little antsy.
Well, you stole my question.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's why I'm the moderator. I asked the right questions.
So my biggest thing with roasters is know your limitations
Yeah.
and also know your city codes, because you need to know how far you can go with that gas line.
Exactly.
Yeah, because there's one of the cities, I have a roaster that wants me to work on his machine. I can't touch it because I don't have an HVAC black pipe license. So you have to know your city codes.
And you have to be a ticketed, you have to be a qualified ticketed person, because if regardless if you are or not, legal personal liability, they fall on you as an unlicensed person if you're working on that machine. So not only is there a massive safety component, you could also be working your way into some legal issues. So make sure you know what you can do and what you can't do when it comes to actually working on gas on a machine.
That's a great
and respect the gas.
Yeah, I would say the last time I installed a venting system, and this is really critical, and I think Doug probably remembers because he was there, that the city code inspector required us to do something which was completely in contrary to the manufacturer of the roaster and the venting manufacturer's code, and would have caused us to have massive problems and probably eventually a fire. And trying to overrule a city HVAC inspector on a roaster install, you really have to know what you're doing. And in this case, you know, we were followed the manufacturer's recommendations, not the recommendations of our local authorities. So this is it's just not the same as putting in an espresso machine, you know. So
I just want to say I've had that exact same thing happen to me as well, with where an inspector wanted me to put a sprinkler head inside of my exhaust stack.
Right.
Oh.
I've had the same thing with you know, Dedrick doesn't certify their afterburners with the ETA. So the roaster and the stack are all, but then we had when we moved our Dedrick, you know, they bounced our afterburner and because it wasn't ETL certified, I had to pay for certification and move it from one location to another. It was expensive.
Wow.
That's interesting. Keegan, how about you?
Yeah, so knowing that sometimes documentation can be sparse or hard to get to, and you know, there's not a lot of folks out there who know these systems inside and out. What resources are available, or what steps can a technician take if they want to expand their skill set into being able to service roasters? And not necessarily like one brand in particular, but just kind of in general.
I would say start with learning how to scrape the pipes. Right?
Yeah.
It's sort of, there's a little bit like the Karate Kid, and really like you gotta
wax on, wax off.
wax the guy's fence. Yeah. So go in and learn how to clean out the exhaust system. Maybe from there, if it's a traditional roaster, learn how to blow out the burners, learn how to lube the bearings, right? Start with things that definitely need to happen on a frequent basis and build from there. And as has been said here, never expand beyond your zone of comfort. Because the consequences are dire. And it's not just, we're talking a lot about gas here. but a normal coffee shop may have 7 espresso machines at different locations, right? Or if a machine goes down, you might even be able to get a loaner. If your roaster goes down, it's irreplaceable, right? So as a technician, there's a different risk that you need to be aware of when you start working on somebody's roaster.
Candace, we haven't heard from you yet.
Oh, sorry. Can you restate the question, please?
Yeah, I'm just curious what.
Go for it, Keegan.
What?
Oh no!
What
I know
resources are?
Sorry.
Okay.
What I wanted to say was, yes, Arno is correct. Start with the stuff that needs to be done most frequently, because that gives you time to recognize what machine you're working on individually and figure out the timetable for cleaning or maintenance or other systems. But one I will add to what I was saying was impellers. Those fans have got to be clean because they've got to move. The more buildup they have on them, the less efficient that they are. The less efficient they are, you wonder what's going on with your roaster because your roasters aren't completing on time. And that's like a really easy fix. So techs looking at really kind of easy things that owners may not have thought of because it's not concerning to them. It's not something on their mind. That would be the I would start with.
Excellent. You guys, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to do closing statements. Next week's episode, I actually don't have it in front of me, but I'll be awesome as always. Let's start with Arno. Anything to impart on our viewers before we wrap it up?
I just want to say, like, we've said some things that are really inviting, some things that are dating. That's on purpose. If you're curious about this, I really want to encourage people to start exploring, but do so in a safe manner, right? And that might mean with somebody else who can be a bit of a mentor to you, or just take it easy as you get into this world. But it needs to happen, and you'll be rewarded for learning about roasters.
David?
Yeah, I'd say 2 things, because this is a common complaint from the manufacturer I work with the most is, have you read the manual for the roaster that you bought? Number 1 complaint from this manufacturer that I work with, that people call before they even open up the book. And the second thing I would say, if you haven't been to a retreat with a whole bunch of people who know a whole lot about roasters, and talk to the manufacturers all in one place from all over the country, hopefully you'll get a chance to attend a guild retreat and spend some time in person dealing with all the stuff that we've been talking about. It's a fantastic opportunity.
And Candace?
Man, David stole my line, but yes, go to retreat. David was one of the first people that I met as a roaster, and I was in awe, and I was like, oh my God, it's David Myers. And I would see him at retreat, and now here I am presenting with him. You realize what a big deal that is for me? So like, I'm just saying that.
I have the same opinion of you, Candace, believe me.
Oh, you shush. But it's true, like I met some incredible minds, people who you would think were too impressive to talk to, who sat and took the time with me to make sure that I felt comfortable within the community, knew what I was doing, and would help and further me as much as they have. And the second is, if you are willing to work with a contained ball of gas and fire, then come to us, because we love it. It's awesome and terrifying, and you'll feel like some like metal god. It's great. I love it. I definitely play the AC/DC when I'm roasting.
For those of you listeners who are getting started, all of us in coffee have that story. I personally started as a barista, and now I'm here, and I think Arno, you did too, didn't you? And
yeah,
one
absolutely.
of the things I want to echo what Candace says is coffee is incredibly caring and will support our own. And it's always a really good interview. And I want to encourage our viewers to really learn and grow as you guys enter the industry. So we're going to hear from Keegan, Kurt, and Maria. Maria, you first.
Well, at first, I want to thank everybody for coming together. Candace, I know I reached out to you just last week, and your willingness to just jump in, really appreciated. David, Arno, both of you are luminaries and always so giving of your time. So I just wanted to thank you. And I think, Candace, I can't wait to, go visit you next and rock some AC/DC. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
Kurt, how about you?
First thing, thank you to Arno, David, and Candace for coming together for this. But I do want to point out from the standpoint of a service tech company and a tech, if you're willing to take on roasters, make sure you understand your customers, roasting customers, are emergency customers. Don't take these on if you're not willing to show up within hours. So, because they will be choking you. They will show up at your house.
I'll come to your house in the middle of the night. I don't even care.
So I just wanted to point that out. Don't take on roasters unless you're willing to dedicate the time to it.
And let's end with Keegan.
Yeah, really just thank you all so much. Very informative session here. And as soon as we log off, I'm going to start digging into some roaster resources because I've done some roasting myself and really kind of had no idea what was going on inside. That kind of speaks to where I was roasting. But yeah, just thank you all so much, and definitely looking forward to learning more.
You know, one of my favorite books when I first got started was Keith David's Roasting 101, which I had my staff read. If you really want to get into it, I really recommend. That's a great place to get started. And Scott Rowe's done some great books. With that, we're going to call it. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank Maria, Keegan, and Kurt for being part of the team. David, Arno, and Candace, we will see you here again soon, I hope. And you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you at Expo soon.
Thanks, bye.
Arno, Doug apologizes for